How aware are you? Today I want to talk about awareness. Welcome to this edition of Tuesday Talks with Twyla. I have often talked about awareness being the very first step when we're self-coaching, because if we don't know what we're thinking about, we really don't know what the problem is, and we have to know what the problem is in order to find the solution. But I heard a twist on this the other day that really got my attention. So being aware of what we're thinking is always the starting point when we're trying to figure out what is going on. What is the challenge that we're facing? What is the emotion that we can't maybe figure out, or that we're noticing the discomfort related to it, or just has this unsettled feeling around it? We have to become aware of our thoughts and aware of what's going on in our body, and really just building that awareness skill around all of it. But the importance of this, I heard this concept the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, it was like light bulb moment, head explosion, like it was that big. Like our identity or our self-concept or our self kind of, self-concept, right? The way that we look at ourself is only as accurate as our awareness. So there's a lot of facets to us, right? There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of just all kinds of things that make up who we are today, who we've been in the past, who we were when we were young, who we were maybe when we went through college, maybe when we first got married, maybe when we started our first job, maybe when we first had kids, right? There's lots of stages that we go through in our life. And when you think of it that way, in those kind of categories, you can imagine the evolution or the change, the transformation that occurred as you going through those times of life, right? Absolutely, we change with all of that. And when I heard this concept about our awareness is only as accurate as what we're aware of, I was like, there's so much more that can be there if we're not doing this work regularly or deeply enough, right? And I feel like I do this work a fair amount. And when I heard this, I thought, oh, I wonder what else is there. Like, I wonder what else I could reveal, that I could expose, discover about myself if I dug deeper, if I got more curious, if I was open to it. Because that's part of this. I know, at least for me, there's often resistance around this exploration. And part of it, I think, is a self-protection mechanism. And it can come from, anything that we've experienced that would build some resistance around being really open and vulnerable, even with ourselves. And so knowing that there can be some resistance there, right, tells us that we might have to go a little deeper, that we might have to pry a little harder. And now this isn't like an interrogation, and this isn't something where you have to reveal any of this to anyone else, right? All of this work is private and personal to us. And that's why it's so important that we are actually getting to all of it. Because in the awareness is the availability of anything that we want. Because if we know what's there, if we know what self-concept we have, or the thoughts about ourselves, or what we're thinking in these types of moments or these types of circumstances or situations, when we become aware of all of that, what is our go-to thinking? What do we wake up thinking? What is kind of the almost hidden voice in the background? And I say hidden because it's not always right? Readily available in our awareness. And so it's hidden in that aspect, but we're listening to it, unfortunately. And because sometimes it's not very positive self-talk, right? And so that little voice in the background, what is it saying? Getting really aware and curious about what is that? What's there? What is the first thing I think when I make a mistake, or I find an error in my work, or I lash out at my kids because I'm tired, or I say something to my husband I wish I hadn't? What is the first thoughts that we think, way that we talk to ourselves, words that we use when we talk to ourselves? What is the first thing that happens in those situations, right? And getting curious about all of these different types of situations and circumstances and experiences, and how do we handle them? And building that awareness. Because if we want to create something different in our lives, we have to know where we're starting from. We have to know what's there now. And this awareness piece is how we do that. And knowing right from the beginning that there might be some resistance around this, and creating an environment of safety around just becoming aware. Just revealing the information doesn't mean that it has to change. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong or there's something wrong with you, right? Most of these, I'm going to say, kind of habits or behaviors towards ourselves are very common. It's kind of our human nature. And so just come to this with complete openness, with kindness and compassion always, right? Because if we layer on guilt and shame about what we find, that's going to build that resistance. We're not going to want to get deeper and explore more if we're shaming ourselves, if we're feeling so guilty and we're beating ourselves up about all of the information that we find. And there's just no place for that. That doesn't foster growth and foster openness and foster change. And that's why we're doing this, right? Is there's something different that we want in our life. And so we want to build this awareness to find out what's going on right now. What am I thinking now? And understanding that this is kind of just that first step. And it's just an exploration. It's just kind of I like to call it a brainstorming session, because when I first learned about brainstorming, it was just like unloading everything. There's no dumb answer. There's no dumb idea. It's just anything and everything that you could ever think of. We're just brainstorming here, right? And I mean, I suppose we learned this, I'm assuming, in some kind of an English class where we were, writing a paper or doing something that we would take kind of this what I call now is kind of a brain dump, right? But it's a brainstorming, all these ideas, all this information, and then we're going to whittle it down. We're either going to create our topic and our bullet points, or we're going to do an outline, or we're going to do a paper, we're going to do an essay, like whatever was the final result or product. We started with a brainstorming session. And maybe you had a topic or, kind of a place to start that you're brainstorming about something. And you can do that here too. If just like a complete brainstorming of everything feels massive, I mean, it is, right? And so start with what is all of the thoughts that I typically will have first thing in the morning? Let's build our awareness around how we're starting our day. What is the first thing we think when we wake up? What wakes us up in the morning? I had that happen to me this morning, and I don't even know why. I just leaned into it and allowed it. I had just such an unsettling feeling when I woke up, and I don't know where it was coming from. And so I used to have a lot of resistance around this, and now I just lean into it. I just allow it, because I know that the resistance to it blocks my ability to create the change that I want to change. I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning feeling that same way. So I want to just allow what's there Instead of having resistance to it, I used to thought swap. I used to try to think about something different, right? I used to try to be constructive with, if I'm going to be up thinking, what can I be thinking about? And this morning, I just leaned into it. I just got really curious about it. Like, wow, this feels really uncomfortable. Like it was just a pit in my stomach. I mean, it kind of made me nauseous. It was just like, and I was like, what is this? Like, it feels like fear. It almost feels like panic. And I just described it. And I got really curious about it. So pick a time or a scenario, or pick a category that you want to start with, that you want to start exploring. Maybe first thing in the morning. Maybe you notice that like every day on the way home from work, you notice that like, you know, your anxiety comes up, or your frustration level comes up, or your stress level comes up, some part of your life or experience right now that you want to take a look at. And so hone in on just that. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do a brainstorm and I'm going to build my awareness around everything, pick a spot, pick a place to channel your focus, and let's just start there. And we're just exploring. We're just asking the questions. And I would recommend either the notes in your phone or grabbing a piece of paper and doing this brainstorming session of what all am I thinking? What am I feeling? What does it feel like? Right? Like this morning, I just, I was describing it to myself in bed, right? Like, so I didn't grab a pen and paper. I was just laying in bed. It was 4 a.m. My husband's asleep next to me. And so I'm just doing this in my head. I'm doing it in my mind, silently, quietly, right? But I'm still doing the work. So in the moments you can do it that way. If you have this happen and that's what you're experiencing, can be on the way home, right? You're not going to pull over to the side of the road while you're on your drive home from work. You could be doing this work in your head, just like I did this morning in bed. But if you have the opportunity to write it down, that is a really good idea. There's something about the actual act of putting the pen to the paper and the brain going out through the hand. And there's just lots of research on how beneficial that is. So absolutely, if you have that available to you, I highly recommend it. If it's in the moment, it's absolutely fine to just do it in your head. And we just want to come to this with complete openness, because we don't want to bring in any resistance. We want to just be completely open to anything and everything that we might discover, that we might uncover, that we might reveal that we didn't know was there. And compassion always, right? It's okay no matter what you find. There is nothing about you that you should be afraid to discover. We want to find any of it, all of it, so that we can start working on it. Because the idea here is that once we know what we're thinking about ourselves, once we build the awareness, this is a practice that we want to do regularly. So I find it, if I'm doing an exercise like this, right, I can ask myself the questions, I can prepare myself to be open and be discovering and be kind of in that exploratory, in that brainstorming kind of like mindset, right? And I'm doing an exercise, so I'm thinking about it and I'm focused and I'm doing the work. What I've noticed is those times, right, I'm focused and I'm doing it. So how much am I aware of what I'm thinking throughout the rest of the day, right? When there isn't something significant, when I'm just going about my day, I'm just doing my normal things, then what am I thinking about? What kinds of things, because we always have thoughts, right? And this is where I was like, oh, this might be where there is some unintentional thinking happening, right? Because I know that our thoughts create our results, I'm very intentional about what I want to be thinking. And when I put my focus on that, that's what I'm thinking. And I'm very intentional about it. And I can set the tone in the morning and I can kind of decide how I want to focus a thought if something else comes up, right? I kind of have like that underlying foundation of thoughts that is guiding my life generally, is guiding certain aspects of my life maybe more specifically. But what happens when kind of like my mind wanders or when I'm not as intentional? And this is times where like I find when I'm driving, for whatever reason, when I'm driving in the car, whatever, I don't know why, but that sparks like the most excited thoughts in me always. Like I'm always just like bouncing and thinking the most excited things while I'm driving the car. But other times, like maybe I'm doing the dishes or maybe I'm folding clothes. Like what am I thinking about then? Or I'm trying to decide on, something for my business, or maybe planning for something or something family related. Like when I'm, just doing other kinds of tasks, where's my mind at? What are my predominant thoughts? And are they predominantly positive? Are they in the same line of thinking of where I want to be going with my life? Or are they squirreling away in a different direction? And I realized that I don't know, right? Because I hadn't built the awareness around those other times of my thinking, right? Because we think constantly, right? There's a statistic out there of how many thoughts we have, I think, in a day. If you think about it by the hour or by the minute, we're always thinking. That's the bottom line. However many thoughts there are in the course of a day, there's always a thought, right? There's always a thought in our mind at any given moment. So what are they, right? What are they when this? What are they when that? What are they when I'm not directing them, when I'm not being intentional with them? Where do they go, right? It's kind of like if you just imagine like herding cats or, any kind of, thing that would squirrel away. Like, where does it go when you're not guiding it? Like if you imagine walking your dog and not having a leash, where would your dog go, right? Would it stay right next to you or would it just wander off? And that's what our thoughts do. And so do we have them on a leash? Do we know what they are, right? I would argue for myself, they're not on a leash, right? I mean, I try to be very intentional about this is the direction I'm going and this is the way I want to be thinking always. But when I'm not, holding on to the leash, when I'm not directing it or being intentional, where are they? And so as I've started to build that kind of additional layer of awareness around the other times of what I'm thinking, it's been really revealing, right? There's times where I'm like, and sometimes I'll do it after the fact. Sometimes I'll notice during, what am I thinking about right now? Right. And so just building kind of that skill or that muscle of doing that regularly has been really revealing of what all I'm thinking all the time. So if you're brand new to this work, I would start with finding the times maybe that are the most challenging or uncomfortable, right? Because if you have an uncomfortable feeling, it's coming from the thoughts that you're thinking. So we want to maybe start there. Maybe that's too much and you want to start at an easy time. This is kind of a comfortable time for me. I want to start there. It doesn't matter. You get to pick, right? There's no wrong answer here because the exercise is the same, right? Building the skill of becoming aware of what we're thinking is the purpose of this whole video today. The whole exercise is just to build the awareness, to know what's there, to know what we're thinking, and to get good at figuring out what that is. Getting practiced at turning inward to figure out what we're thinking. When we have maybe something happen and we're like, whoa, it catches us off guard. What was that? I wonder, what was I thinking there, right? What made that so much more uncomfortable than it probably needed to be, or that it should have been, right? And the other thing that I've noticed is as I've been trying to be more positive and not allow really any kind of negative thoughts or negative thinking, I notice when either my husband and I or a friend and I start kind of going into that like that negative spin that we do, right? Like, oh, can you believe that they did this? And like, this is happening and all of this stuff. And there's just this layer of negativity around all of it. And I've been really noticing that, like, how often do I do that? And why? Why am I doing that? Why am I so focused on the negative here? Why am I even talking about this stuff, right? And I've always noticed about myself that I'm kind of a self-proclaimed problem solver. I like to find solutions. So if there's something that is happening, like, you know, in my old job, if we had a problem or we had something happen, I always wanted to figure out what the solution was, and then also how to prevent this from happening again. So if it was errors or something happened with the customer, like, how did it happen? So find the problem and then the solution, and then how do we prevent this from happening again? Like, what actually caused this so it doesn't happen again, or we can put, you know, some kind of safety layer in there or some control in there so it doesn't happen again. And then if this could happen, like, what else could possibly happen, right? Taking it this step further. And so I like to, you know, think of myself as kind of that problem solver, solution seeker. And so when I have like, okay, you know, why am I doing this? And how can I avoid that, right? Like, especially if it's a pattern of this is just kind of what we do. This is, you know, just kind of, and I know that maybe the other person really likes to have these kinds of conversations. You know, how can I reframe it for myself instead of being like, you know, I just don't want to talk about that today, or I just, you know, that's so negative, or, you know, whatever would maybe hinder that relationship with that person. How can I reframe it for myself? How can I manage my thinking and the things that I do say to contribute to the conversation, or create more of like that, almost like amplifying the negativity of the conversation? How can I be either more neutral or more positive to not amplify that, to tone it down? And how can I reframe it for myself so I don't just have this completely negative like thought storm, I guess, and kind of this negative thought experience? How can I reframe that for myself? So exercising the skill of becoming aware can be applied in lots of different areas, situations, circumstances in our lives. And so as you start practicing this, you can pick a time, pick a category, pick an area of your life that you want to become more aware around, and just do the work, and then do it more, right? Like, continue to do it. This is definitely not something where it's a one and done, where we do it and we've just kind of like, you know, almost like we've gone through everything and now we're done, right? It's ever changing. And as we evolve and as we become aware of some things, there's more likely more to explore. There's deeper to go. There's more that we can become aware of. And the more that we do that, the more we have agency over what is happening in our mind, what we're thinking, and how we're being intentional with our thoughts and creating the life that we want. Because if the awareness is what makes up who we are or who we think we are, and we're only aware of this tiny piece, the example that this person had expressed was the type of people that would typically describe themselves as being extremely positive or always positive. Maybe once you kind of got in there, they'd be very surprised at the amount of negative talk they have. And I was like, wow, right? Like, we're only aware of what we're aware of, right? It's kind of like we only know what we know. Like, you don't know what you don't know, kind of thing. And so we think that we are just this. But what if, right? What if there's a whole new world there? What if, like, you know, I always think of like the sinkhole where like the asphalt falls through and there's like this little opening, and then underneath is like this huge void that is very scary, by the way. And so it can be kind of like that, where we think, you know, we've kind of got it captured right here. Like this is it. This is us. This is who we think we are. And then, like, what if there's so much more there? And the more that we discover, the more we can change, the more we can be intentional about it and keep the things that we love. Maybe there's a ton of stuff that we love and that we're not even aware of. Let's explore that. Let's reinforce that. Let's amplify that. And then maybe the negative stuff, it's like, well, let's take a look at that. What's going on there? And get curious about it. But if we're only aware of this little piece and that's all we think we are, I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you, there is so much more. We are very complex, multifaceted, and with that, like thousands of thoughts a day, there's definitely some that you have not discovered yet. So that is my challenge to you, is to find more thoughts, become more aware about what you're thinking, and use this to maybe focus on the areas that you want to make the most change right now, and then just keep doing the work in other areas, in all areas. And even like for me, who feels like I do this regularly, do this daily, where else? How much more is there? Because when you start getting curious, you might discover, wow, there's actually a lot. So it can be very eye-opening, but remember, always remember, we come to this with kindness and compassion always. There's no place for shame and judgment, opinions, and beating ourselves up, guilt. None of that has a place in here. It is just us exploring us and using it to create the life that we want. There's no place for shame. We want to be open to this so that we don't create resistance. So with that, what are you aware of in your life right now? And where are you going to expand your awareness? I'm so excited to hear how this goes for you. Until next week, have an amazing week.